Moment my mother-in-law slid the folder across the table and said, "We just need your signature, sweetheart. It's only a formality," I felt my stomach drop. Not because I was afraid, because I had seen that folder before, and she had no idea what I had already done with it. My name is Brooke, and I've been married to my husband Curtis for 6 years. 6 years of casseroles I didn't ask for showing up at our door with a side of unsolicited opinions. 6 years of "we're family, we handled things together," which always, without exception, meant I handled the bill and they handled the benefits. His mother, Harriet, had a way of making generosity feel like a trap. She wrapped every request in warmth so thick you didn't notice you were suffocating until you were already $3,000 in. His sister Bryn was worse. Bryn had never worked a full calendar year in her life. She bounced between passion projects, a candle business, a Pilates certification she never used, a catering company that catered exactly one event, and between each collapse, she landed on us. On me, specifically. Curtis would come home and say, "Bryn's going through a rough patch," and I would look at our savings account and quietly calculate how long before it was my rough patch too. I want to be honest about something, because I've seen people in the comments of stories like mine ask the question I used to ask myself, why did you stay quiet so long? The real answer isn't pretty. I stayed quiet because I loved my husband. I genuinely, stupidly, with my whole chest loved him, and I kept believing that if I just held on a little longer, he'd see it. He'd see what his family was doing to us, to me, and he'd choose us. I kept waiting for that moment. I waited for 6 years. It never came, so I stopped waiting and started planning. It started 18 months ago, quietly. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. I opened a separate checking account at a different bank than the one Curtis and I shared. I started moving small amounts, nothing dramatic, nothing that would flag on our joint statements as unusual. Just steady, patient repositioning of what was legally mine anyway, money I had earned. Money that had been hemorrhaging out of our shared account for years in ways Curtis conveniently never questioned. I also called an attorney. Her name was Margaret, and she was the kind of woman who said everything in a measured, steady tone that made you feel like the world made sense. I told her everything. She listened without blinking. Then she told me exactly what I needed to know about the property we own jointly, the house we bought together 4 years ago, with a down payment that had come almost entirely from my inheritance from my grandmother. That inheritance that Curtis had at the time called our lucky break. Margaret told me that with the right documentation, which I happened to have, my claim to that property was considerably stronger than Curtis or Harriet had probably ever thought to consider. I filed the paperwork in February, quietly, like a person who has been underestimated for so long they've started to enjoy it. The dinner was Harriet's idea. She called it a family meeting over a nice meal, her words, which in practice meant she'd made a reservation at the kind of steakhouse where the menus don't have prices, and the bill is always someone else's problem. Ours, specifically. Curtis confirmed the reservation and mentioned it to me the way you'd mention a dentist appointment. Just a thing on the calendar. Wear something nice. I wore something nice. I also made 2 phone calls that afternoon that he didn't know about. The 5 of us sat down at a corner booth. Harriet, Curtis, Bryn's newest boyfriend, whose name I never caught because Harriet spent the evening calling him the young man, and me. The bread basket came. The wine list came. Harriet ordered a bottle without looking at the price, which I had already looked at on their website, $280. Bryn ordered the ribeye. The young man ordered the ribeye. Curtis ordered the ribeye. I ordered the salmon because I have always been the person at this table who makes the reasonable choice, and I wanted to enjoy that salmon. Harriet waited until we were midway through our entrees before she produced the folder. It was a loan agreement, $11,000, to be co-signed by Curtis and me, deposited directly into an LLC that Bryn had just registered, a boutique event planning company, which as far as I could tell existed entirely as a name on a document and a mood board on Pinterest. The framing was straightforward. We were family. Bryn had a real opportunity this time, and she just needed a little runway. Harriet pushed the folder toward me specifically because Curtis had apparently already verbally agreed. He just hadn't mentioned that part to me. "It's only 11,000, Harriet said. "A drop in the bucket for you too." There it was. That word, only. I looked at the folder. I looked at Curtis. He had his eyes on his plate, which told me everything I needed to know about how much of a conversation we'd had about this before tonight. I picked up the folder. I opened it. I read the first page slowly, the way you read something when you want the other people at the table to start feeling the silence. Then I closed it. "I can't sign this," I said. Harriet's smile tightened at the corners. "Sweetheart, it's just a formality. You're not really on the hook for anything." "Harriet," I kept my voice even, not cold, not sharp. "Even. I understand what you're asking. I'm telling you I'm not going to do it." Curtis looked up. "Brooke, we talked about this." "You talked about it," I said. "You didn't talk to me about it." Bryn made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a scoff, the noise she always made when she was about to say something designed to make me feel small. "I don't understand why you always make everything so difficult. It's not like you don't have it." I set the folder down on the table between us. "Tell me something, Bryn. Do you know what our savings account balance was 2 years ago?" She blinked. "What?" "Because I do. I know what it was 2 years ago, and I know what it was after the loan for your catering equipment, and I know what it was after the security deposit for your studio space downtown, which we paid because you said you'd reimburse us and you never did." I kept my hands flat on the table, very still. I've been the quiet one at this table for 6 years. I've been the one who says yes when I should say no, who writes the check so there's no conflict, who goes home and looks at the account and does the math that no one else around here bothers to do. And I have been patient about that, because I thought eventually the math would become obvious to everyone. But it hasn't, so I need to say it clearly tonight. I'm not signing this. The table was very quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the other tables around you, conversations about normal things, a man laughing at something on the other side of the restaurant. Harriet recovered first. She always recovered first. "After everything this family has done for you," she said, and the warmth in her voice had gone somewhere else entirely. "After everything Curtis has given up to build a life with you." "What has he given up?" I asked. Genuine question. I was curious. She didn't answer that. "I've spent 6 years giving things up," I said. "I gave up the account balance I had when we got married. I gave up the promotion I turned down because Bryn needed help moving, and Curtis asked me to take the week off. I stopped. Not because I was upset, because the list was long and the salmon was getting cold, and I only wanted to get to the part that mattered. It doesn't matter. The point is, I'm not signing." Curtis pushed back from the table slightly. "Can we just get through dinner and talk about this at home like adults?" "Sure," I said. I picked up my fork. Harriet and Bryn exchanged a look. The young man studied the bread basket. Curtis cut his steak. We got through dinner. The bill came in one of those dark leather folders, the kind that sits on the table like a quiet accusation. Our waiter set it down without making eye contact. Harriet looked at it, then looked at me, the way she always did. The transfer of expectation so practiced it was almost graceful. I didn't reach for it. Curtis reached for it. He opened it. And I watched his face do something I had never seen it do before. It went completely, entirely blank. "What is this?" he said. Not a question. A statement. I leaned over slightly to look, even though I already knew. "What does it say?" "It says," he stopped, looked at it again. "This says the card was declined." "Which card?" I asked. "The joint card." He said it slowly. "Brooke, what happened to the joint card?" "The joint account was closed," I said, 3 weeks ago." Harriet's head turned toward me so fast I thought she'd get whiplash. "I beg your pardon?" "The account that card was linked to," I said, "doesn't exist anymore. I closed it. My direct deposits were already rerouted. The account had been running on my income almost exclusively for the past 2 years. I have the statements to prove it, so when I closed it, I moved those funds to an account in my name only." Bryn made a noise like she'd been struck. "You can't do that. That's joint property." "It was a joint account," I said, "with joint account holders who have equal rights to open and close it. I exercised mine." Curtis's voice had gone very quiet. "Brooke, why didn't you tell me?" "Because," I said simply, "you didn't tell me about the loan agreement, so I thought we were doing things unilaterally now." The waiter reappeared, hovering at a respectful distance, with the practiced anxiety of someone who could feel the temperature of the table from across the room. Curtis turned to him. "There seems to be an issue with our card. Can you give us a moment?" "Of course," the waiter said and retreated. Harriet's composure cracked, just slightly at the edges. "Curtis, fix this." "I'm trying to." He pulled out his personal card, the one he kept separate. I watched him hand it to the waiter when he came back. I watched the waiter run it. I watched Curtis's jaw tighten when the waiter came back a second time and said quietly, apologetically, that this one had also been declined. Curtis looked at me. I looked at him. "I froze that one too," I said. "Temporarily. I called the bank this morning. I told them I had reason to believe there'd been an unauthorized charge attempt, and I wanted a hold placed until I could review the account. They were very understanding." Bryn slapped her hand on the table, not loudly enough to make the whole restaurant turn, but loudly enough that the nearby tables noticed. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane. You're doing this on purpose, in front of everyone." "I'm eating dinner," I said. "You're the one making a scene." Harriet looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more like recalibration, like she was seeing me for the first time, and adjusting every assumption she'd built over 6 years. "You planned this," she said. "Harriet," I said gently, "you planned the folder. I planned everything else." My phone was already in my hand. I'd excused the text 20 minutes ago as checking something, which was true. I was checking that my attorney had received the confirmation I needed. Now I opened my email, found the document, and turned the screen toward Curtis. "What am I looking at?" he said. "That's the filing," I said. "I submitted a motion 6 weeks ago regarding the division of the house. Given that the down payment was documented inheritance from my grandmother, and given that for the past 3 years I've been the sole contributor to the mortgage, while your income has largely been redirected to other things, I paused to let that land, because we both knew what other things meant. And one of those other things was sitting directly across from me in a cashmere sweater that I had also technically paid for. My attorney believes my claim to primary equity is strong. The motion was accepted for review last Thursday." Curtis stared at the screen. He didn't say anything for a long time. Bryn said, "She's bluffing." "I'm not a bluffer," I said. "You know that about me. I've never once in 6 years bluffed. I've just been quiet." Harriet said, "Curtis, say something." He looked up at me, and I saw it there, finally, what I had been looking for all those years, not the choosing us moment I'd imagined, but something more honest than that. I saw understanding. The specific terrible understanding of a person who has just realized that the version of events they've been telling themselves is not the version that happened. "How long?" he said. "How long have you been planning this?" 18 months, I said. He closed his eyes. "The motion doesn't have to go forward," I said, and I meant it. "That's not what tonight is about. Tonight is about this." I gestured to the folder, still sitting at the edge of the table. "Tonight is about the fact that you agreed to co-sign an $11,000 loan on my behalf without telling me. It's about the fact that your mother handed me a folder and said it was only a formality, as if my name and my credit and my financial future are formalities. It's about the 6 years of only and temporary and she's family, babe." I kept my voice steady. "I'm not doing it anymore. And I needed you to understand that I mean it. That I am not someone who has no options. That I have been choosing every single time, and tonight I'm choosing differently." The waiter came back a third time, looking genuinely pained. I picked up my own card, the one linked to the account that was entirely, cleanly only mine, and I handed it to him. "I've got it," I said. "Just mine and my husband's portion. The rest of the table can sort themselves out." Harriet's mouth opened. "You're family," I said pleasantly. "You handle things together. I'm sure you'll figure it out." Bryn looked at her mother. Her mother looked at the waiter. The young man, who had not spoken a single word the entire evening, slowly reached into his jacket pocket and produced his own wallet with the resigned expression of a man who understood exactly what kind of family he had gotten involved with. My portion of the bill was $47. I left a 25% tip because the waiter had handled an extraordinarily uncomfortable situation with more grace than most of the people at the table. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. Curtis stood too, automatically a reflex. "Are you coming home?" he asked. "I'm going home," I said. "We should talk, for real this time, not in front of your family, not over a folder, not with you already having agreed to something before I walk in the room. Just us, like two people who are supposed to be partners." He nodded, slowly. Harriet said, "Brooke, we are not finished." "I know," I said, "but I am, for tonight." I picked up my purse. I looked at Harriet and then at Bryn, and I tried to find something like warmth for them because I had once had it, genuinely, before they'd spent 6 years spending it down to nothing. The loan isn't happening. Not tonight, not next week, not after a longer conversation. That answer isn't going to change. And if either of you would like to have a different kind of relationship, one where I'm a person at the table and not a line item, I'm open to that. But that's a conversation for another time. I walked out. The parking lot was cool and smelled like rain coming in from somewhere west. I sat in my car for a few minutes with the engine off, not crying, not triumphant, just breathing. The kind of breathing you do when something that's been pressing on your chest for a very long time has finally been named out loud. Curtis came out about 10 minutes later. He got into the passenger seat. He didn't say anything for a while, and I let him have that, because whatever he was working through, he needed to work through it honestly, and I wasn't going to rush him. Finally he said, "I didn't know it was that bad." "I know," I said. "That's part of the problem." "I should have." "Yeah," I said, "you should have." Another long quiet. Somewhere in the distance a car alarm went off and then stopped. "Is the motion real?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and I meant what I said. It doesn't have to go forward. But it will if we can't figure out how to actually be partners, real ones, not the version where I absorb everything quietly and you assume that means things are fine. He looked out the window. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to stop agreeing to things that involve my name and my money before you talk to me. I need your family to stop treating me like a bank they have a personal relationship with, and I need to know." I stopped. This was the part that actually hurt. Underneath all the planning and the patience and the 18 months of careful repositioning, I need to know that when it comes down to it, you're going to choose us, not them, us. Curtis turned to look at me, and he looked tired and a little ashamed, and younger than his age in the way that people look when they finally stop defending something they knew was wrong. "I want to fix this," he said. "Then let's fix it," I said. "But the next time your mother slides a folder across the table at me, you need to be the one who says no first, before I have to." He nodded. I started the car. I didn't know how the next chapter would go, whether the motion would be needed, whether Harriet would ever look at me as anything other than the woman who'd embarrassed her at dinner, whether Bryn would find some other runway and some other person willing to be that runway for her. I didn't know if Curtis and I would rebuild or dissolve, or if rebuilding was even the right word for what we needed to do. But I knew something I hadn't fully known before that night, sitting in that parking lot with the rain finally starting to come down soft against the windshield. I knew that I had options. I had always had options. I'd just been so busy keeping the peace that I'd forgotten to count them. I wasn't going to forget again. I used to think patience was the same thing as strength. I was wrong about that for a long time. When I sat at that table and watched Harriet slide that folder toward me like it was nothing, like my name on a document was a formality, like $11,000 was a rounding error, like 6 years of quiet compliance had simply confirmed that I would always say yes, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud before. Patience without limits isn't strength. It's just a slower way of disappearing. What changed things for me wasn't the dinner. It wasn't the decline card or the look on Curtis's face or even Harriet's voice going cold when I didn't reach for the pen. What changed things was the 18 months before all of that, the quiet decisions, the attorney's office, the separate account. The mornings I sat with bank statements and made myself look at every number instead of looking away the way I'd been doing for years. That's where the real work happened, not in the restaurant, not in the parking lot, but in the slow, unglamorous process of deciding that I was worth the trouble of protecting. I think about what Harriet said, "After everything this family has done for you," and I understand now why that phrase stings so specifically. It's designed to make you feel like you owe something you can't name, A debt with no paperwork and no end date. People who use that phrase are counting on you not to audit it. They're counting on the guilt being bigger than the ledger. For years it was. I let that feeling be bigger than the actual numbers, bigger than the evidence sitting right in front of me. That was on me. Not entirely, but partly. And owning that part was the thing that finally let me move. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain, where I ambushed my husband at dinner, where I weaponized our finances and humiliated his family in public. I've sat with that version too, because I think you have to. You have to be honest enough to look at your own choices without flinching. And when I look honestly at what I did, the planning, the documentation, the motion, the frozen card, I don't see cruelty. I see someone who ran out of other options and chose the one that required her to be smart instead of just loud. I needed Curtis to understand in a way that a conversation in our kitchen was never going to reach him. He needed to feel the ground shift to believe it could shift. That was a calculated decision, and I stand by it. The part that stays with me, though, is what happened in the car afterward. Not the explanation, not the motion, not the leverage, but the question Curtis asked, sitting in the passenger seat in the rain. What do you need from me? 4 words. The first time in 6 years he'd asked him without a solution already decided. That question cost him something, and I think the reason it cost him something is because the dinner cost him something. I'm not glad it hurt, but I'm glad it was real. I know now that being treated fairly doesn't happen by accident in any relationship. It happens because someone decides it matters enough to insist on it, and then builds the kind of life that gives that insistence somewhere to stand. You can't demand respect on a foundation you've let other people hollow out. You have to know what you have, what you've built, what's actually yours. That knowledge is not cold or calculating, it's just honest. And for the first time in a long time, I'm someone who isn't afraid of being honest, even when the honest answer is that I should have done this 2 years sooner. I don't know where Curtis and I land, but I know where I stand. That's new, that's enough for now.